thinking his royal status puts him above the rules, above the host, above basic human decency. It only took 34 seconds of Prince Harry's arrogance for Jon Stewart to do what no one else in media had the guts to do: throw him out mid-interview. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a collision between someone who spent decades earning respect through wit and honesty, and someone who thought being born into the right family meant he could say whatever he wanted without consequences. The stage was set like any other night. Studio lights gleaming, audience buzzing with excitement, cameras ready to capture what everyone assumed would be a friendly chat. Jon Stewart, the man who built his entire career on holding powerful people accountable, and he sat behind his desk with that familiar smirk. He'd interviewed presidents, dictators, Hollywood royalty, but tonight's guest was different. Tonight, actual royalty was stepping into his world. Prince Harry walked out to thunderous applause. The audience stood, phones out, capturing every second. He waved, smiled that rehearsed smile, and took his seat across from Jon. The energy in the room felt electric, but not in the good way. There was tension before a single word was spoken. Jon opened with his typical charm. "Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here." Harry leaned back in his chair like he owned it. "Well, Jon, I appreciate you having me. Though I must say I expected a bigger chair. This feels rather small." The audience laughed nervously. Jon's eyebrow raised slightly. "The chair's the same one everyone sits in. Presidents, actors, activists. It fits them just fine." "Yes, well," Harry said, adjusting his jacket, "I suppose they're used to smaller accommodations." First red flag. Jon's smile tightened. But he's a professional. He pushed forward. "So, let's talk about your book. You've been very open about your life, your struggles, your family. What made you want to share all of this publicly?" Harry shifted, crossing his legs. "You know, Jon, when you grow up in the spotlight like I did, you don't really have a choice about what's public and what's private. People think they know you. The media invents stories. I simply wanted to set the record straight on my terms." "Right, but you're choosing to do more media to complain about the media. Doesn't that seem a bit, I don't know, contradictory?" The audience oohed. Harry's face changed. The friendly mask slipped just a fraction. "That's a rather simplistic way of looking at it, Jon. But then again, you've never lived my life. You wouldn't understand the complexities." Jon leaned forward. "Help me understand then. Explain the complexity of going on every talk show, every podcast, every interview circuit, while simultaneously claiming you want privacy." "It's about control," Harry said, voice rising slightly. "Something you clearly have here in your little kingdom, but something I never had growing up." Little kingdom. The words hung in the air. Jon's audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was getting personal. "Little kingdom," Jon repeated slowly. "Interesting choice of words from someone who literally grew up in palaces." Harry waved his hand dismissively. "Material wealth doesn't equal freedom, Jon. You, of all people, should understand that. Or perhaps your success has made you forget what it's like to struggle." The studio went quiet. Dead quiet. Jon Stewart, the guy who came from nothing, who worked comedy clubs for years, who built everything himself, just got told he didn't understand struggle by someone born into unimaginable privilege. Jon's jaw clenched. "Let me get this straight. You're sitting here in your designer suit, fresh off your private jet, telling me I don't understand struggle because I've found success?" "I'm saying your perspective is limited," Harry shot back. "You see the world through your American lens. You don't understand duty, tradition, the weight of history on your shoulders." "No, you're right. I don't understand being born into wealth and power and then complaining about it on a world tour. That part's really hard for me to grasp." The audience erupted in applause. Harry's face flushed red. His hands gripped the armrests of that chair he'd complained about moments earlier. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Harry said, voice sharp now. "This is the kind of disrespect I've dealt with my entire life. People thinking they can talk to me however they want, judge me, criticize me." Jon spread his hands. "You came on my show. I ask questions. That's literally the job. If you wanted someone to just nod along while you talk, you should have done another puff piece with your friend Oprah. Don't you dare bring her into this. I'll bring up whoever I want. This is my show. You're a guest. And right now, you're being a pretty terrible one." Harry stood up. Actually stood up from his chair, pointing at Jon. "You have no idea who you're talking to. No idea what I've sacrificed. What I've been through." Jon stood too, matching his energy. "I know exactly who I'm talking to. I'm talking to someone who had every advantage in life and still manages to play the victim better than anyone I've ever seen." "Victim?" Harry's voice cracked with anger. "You think I'm playing victim? My mother died because of the media, because of people like you who make a living tearing others down for entertainment." The air sucked out of the room. Jon's face hardened. "Don't you dare compare what I do to the paparazzi who chased your mother. Don't you dare use her tragedy to deflect from your own entitled behavior right now." "Entitled?" Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're calling me entitled? You sit here night after night, making jokes about people's lives, their pain, their struggles, and I'm the entitled one." "Yeah," Jon said simply. "Yeah, you are. Because I punch up. I go after the powerful, the corrupt, the people who abuse their positions. You punch down. You complained about your brother, your father, your grandmother, all while they couldn't defend themselves publicly because of the very traditions you claim to hate, but also hide behind." Harry's finger was still pointing, shaking now with rage. "You don't know anything about my family. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors." "Then stop telling us." Jon's voice boomed across the studio. "Stop selling us books about it. Stop doing interviews about it. Stop making millions talking about how hard it is to be you. Just stop." The audience was frozen. This had gone from uncomfortable to explosive. Harry took a step closer to Jon's desk, his face twisted in anger. "You're just like the rest of them. You're just another small man who tears down others to make himself feel big." Jon walked around his desk, standing face to face with Harry now. The cameras were still rolling. The audience held their breath. "I'm small?" Jon's voice was quiet but deadly. "I built this from nothing. Every single thing I have, I earned. You were born on third base and spend your whole life complaining you didn't hit a home run. How dare you?" Harry seethed. "How dare I? How dare you come on my show and insult me? Insult my audience. Insult the very platform you begged your people to get you on. I didn't beg for anything. You people came to me. And now I'm asking you to leave." Silence. Complete, utter silence. Harry blinked, like he couldn't process what he just heard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Jon said, voice steady and calm now. "Get off my stage. This interview is over." Harry laughed again, that same bitter sound. "You can't kick me off. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah, I do. You're the guy who's about to be escorted out of my studio." Harry looked around at the audience, at the cameras, like he was waiting for someone to tell him this was a joke. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. This was really happening. "You're making a massive mistake," Harry said, voice low and threatening. "The only mistake I made was thinking you'd be capable of a real conversation. Turns out you just wanted a platform to whine. We're done here." Jon motioned to his producers off stage. 2 security personnel appeared from the wings. The audience gasped. This was unprecedented. This was insane. This was the most dramatic thing that had ever happened on late-night television. Harry held up his hand to the security guards. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." "Then walk yourself out," Jon said flatly. "Either way, you're leaving. This is assault. This is kidnapping or something. It's neither. It's me exercising my right to remove someone from my show who's being disrespectful and hostile." Harry's face went through a series of expressions. Rage, disbelief, embarrassment, more rage. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a second, it looked like he might actually take a swing. The security guards tensed, ready to intervene. But Harry didn't swing. Instead, he did something almost worse. He smiled. A cold, cruel smile. "You're going to regret this, Jon. You have no idea the kind of power I have. The people I know. You just made an enemy you can't afford to have." Jon didn't flinch. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." "Great. Add it to your next book. I'm sure your 12 remaining fans will eat it up. Now get out." The security guards moved closer. Harry realized he had no choice. He couldn't win this. Not here, not now, not on Jon's turf. He straightened his jacket with sharp, angry movements. "This show is garbage anyway," Harry muttered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "You're a has-been, a relic. Nobody watches this anymore." "And yet you came running when we called," Jon replied. "Funny how that works." Harry turned toward the exit, but he couldn't help himself. He spun back around one more time. "You know what your problem is, Jon? You think you're better than everyone else? You think your little comedy routine gives you the right to judge people. But you're nothing. You're a clown, a court jester, and that's all you'll ever be." The audience booed, loudly, passionately. They weren't having it. Jon held up his hand, quieting them down. "You done?" Jon asked. "I'm done with you," Harry spat. "Good, because I was done with you about 10 minutes ago. I just wanted to give you enough rope to hang yourself with. And boy did you deliver." Harry's face turned purple. He opened his mouth to say something else, but one of the security guards gently touched his elbow. "Sir, it's time to go." Harry jerked his arm away. "Get your hands off me." "Then walk," the guard said firmly. For a moment, it looked like Harry might actually cause a physical scene. His body was rigid, his breathing heavy, but he must have realized how bad this already looked, how much worse it would be if he actually got into a scuffle with security on live television. He turned and walked toward the exit, each step heavy with wounded pride. The audience watched in stunned silence. Nobody knew whether to clap, to boo, to laugh, or to just sit there processing what they'd witnessed. As Harry reached the edge of the stage, he stopped. One final moment of defiance. He looked back at Jon, at the cameras, at the audience. "So you'll all see," he said, voice cracking slightly. "You'll all see who was right." And then he was gone. Disappeared behind the curtain, leaving nothing but shock and confusion in his wake. Jon stood there for a second, collecting himself. Then he walked back to his desk, sat down, and looked directly into the camera. His face was serious, no hint of his usual playful demeanor. "Well," he said quietly, "that happened." The audience exploded. Applause, cheers, standing ovation. They weren't clapping for the spectacle. They were clapping for Jon, for standing his ground, for not backing down to someone who thought their title meant they could treat people however they wanted. Jon waited for the noise to die down. "Look," he continued, "I don't take pleasure in that. I really don't. I wanted a good conversation. I wanted to understand his perspective. But respect is a two-way street. You don't get to come on here and insult me, insult my work, insult this show, and expect me to just smile and take it." More applause. Jon nodded, acknowledging it. "I've interviewed people I disagree with. I've interviewed people who've said things I find reprehensible. But there's a difference between disagreement and disrespect. And what you just saw was someone who's so used to people bowing to him that he forgot how to have an actual conversation with someone who won't." The audience hung on every word. This wasn't Jon the comedian now. This was Jon the human being, speaking from the heart. I don't care if you're a prince or a pauper. I don't care if you were born in a palace or a trailer park. When you sit in that chair, so you're equal to everyone else who sat there. No more, no less. And if you can't handle that, if you can't handle being treated like a regular person for 20 minutes, then maybe that says more about you than it does about me. He paused, letting that sink in. The studio was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Respectful, attentive. We're going to take a quick break, Jon said. When we come back, we'll try to get back to some actual entertainment. Maybe something a little less dramatic. The camera cut away as the show went to commercial. But in that studio, the energy was still crackling. The audience members turned to each other, phones out, already texting, tweeting, posting about what they'd just witnessed. The crew stood around, shaking their heads in disbelief. Jon's producers rushed over. He faces a mix of concern and excitement. "That was insane," one of them said. Jon just nodded, still processing it himself. Yeah, it was. Are we going to be in trouble for this? Probably, Jon admitted, but it was worth it. Some things are more important than playing it safe. Backstage, Harry was being ushered toward the exit by security and his own handlers. His face was still red, his eyes blazing with anger and humiliation. He could hear the muffled sounds of the audience still cheering, still applauding Jon. "This is unacceptable," he kept repeating. "Completely unacceptable." His publicist, looking pale and stressed, tried to calm him down. "We need to control the narrative on this. We need to get ahead of it before it spins out of control." But it was already too late for that. The moment had been captured on dozens of phones in the audience. Within minutes, it would be everywhere. Social media would explode. News outlets would run with it. The world would watch Prince Harry getting kicked off Jon Stewart's show over and over again. Back in the studio, the show came back from commercial. Jon had composed himself, slipping back into his professional persona, though you could still see the adrenaline in his eyes. "Welcome back," he said to the camera. "As you just saw, we had a bit of a situation. Our scheduled guest decided that being respectful wasn't really his thing tonight, so we parted ways. It happens." He shrugged, playing it down even though everyone knew how unprecedented this was. "The thing is," Jon continued, "I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've learned that character reveals itself under pressure. You can rehearse your answers, practice your charm, polish your image all you want. But when someone challenges you, when someone doesn't just accept your version of reality, that's when you see who someone really is." The audience murmured in agreement. They'd seen it firsthand. They'd watched the mask slip, watched the entitled anger come pouring out. And look, I get it. Nobody likes being questioned. Nobody enjoys having their beliefs or their actions challenged. It's uncomfortable. But that discomfort, that friction, that's where truth lives. That's where real conversation happens. And some people just can't handle it. Jon leaned back in his chair, that same chair Harry had complained about at the start of the interview. You know what the irony is? He came on this show to promote his story, to tell his truth as he sees it. But he couldn't handle anyone else's truth. He couldn't handle being in a space where he wasn't automatically the most important person in the room. More applause. Jon was hitting a nerve, speaking to something deeper than just this one incident. He was talking about accountability, about ego, about the way power corrupts perspective. I've sat across from dictators who were more gracious than what you just saw. I've interviewed people responsible for actual atrocities who showed more self-awareness and humility. That's not an exaggeration. That's just a fact. The weight of that statement landed hard. Jon wasn't being hyperbolic. He was drawing from decades of experience, putting this moment in context. So yeah, we kicked him out, and I'd do it again. Because this show, this space, it's built on mutual respect. Host and guest. guest and audience. We can disagree. We can debate. We can even argue. But we do it with basic human decency. And the second that goes out the window, the second someone thinks they're too important for that, they lose the privilege of being here. The audience gave him another standing ovation. Jon smiled, genuinely this time, grateful for their support. Anyway, he said, waving them back to their seats, let's talk about something else. Anything else. How about those New York Knicks? The show moved on. Jon interviewed his remaining guests, made his jokes, did his usual brilliant commentary. But everyone knew that wasn't what people would remember from this episode. They'd remember the moment a prince thought he could bully a comedian and learned very quickly that titles mean nothing when you're facing someone with real conviction. In the control room, the producers were already fielding calls. Lawyers wanting to know about liability. Publicists trying to do damage control. Media outlets begging for exclusive comments. It was chaos. Beautiful chaos. But Jon had been through media storms before. He knew how this would play out. There would be backlash from Harry's supporters, claims that Jon had been disrespectful, accusations of bullying or ambush journalism. But there would also be a tidal wave of support from people tired of watching entitled celebrities play victim while actual victims went ignored. The truth was on tape. The whole thing, unedited, raw, real. People could watch it and make up their own minds about who was in the wrong. As the show wrapped and Jon said his final goodbyes to the camera, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not satisfaction exactly, not pride in embarrassing someone, but something deeper. Conviction. The knowledge that he'd stood up for something that mattered, that he'd drawn a line and held it, even when it would have been easier to just let it slide. Because that's what bullies count on. They count on people being too polite, too intimidated, too worried about consequences to call them out. They count on their status protecting them from accountability. And sometimes, just sometimes, someone has to be willing to say enough. Jon had said enough. And in doing so, he'd given voice to everyone who'd ever felt steamrolled by someone